Everyone is telling you that China is taking over the world. But what if the real story is far more complicated and far more frightening than that? Factories, artificial intelligence, high-speed trains, electric vehicles, ports, satellites, a powerful military, and an ongoing effort to build a financial system less dependent on the US dollar. But what if the truth is far more complicated than that? Today, I want to unlock a geopolitical code hidden behind the rivalry between China and the United States.
On one side, people say the American century is over and the Chinese century has begun. But on the other side, analysts argue that China could collapse under its own weight before it ever becomes the world's #1 power. So which side is right? Is China building the empire of the future? Or are we witnessing the final breaths of a great dragon?
Let's break it down. The logic behind the first scenario is simple. Power means money, production, technology, and the ability to build. Over the past few decades, China has transformed itself into one of the largest manufacturing centers on Earth.
From steel and shipbuilding to batteries, solar panels, electric vehicles, telecommunications, and advanced industrial technology, China has built an enormous manufacturing ecosystem. But now, a new weapon has entered the game: artificial intelligence. Imagine a country with massive factories, millions of engineers, enormous amounts of data, digital infrastructure, and huge amounts of capital. AI could multiply the productivity of that entire system.
Factories can operate with robots. Transportation can become more intelligent. Scientific research can accelerate. And even future warfare may depend more heavily on drones, satellites, algorithms, and autonomous systems. Supporters of this scenario argue that if the future belongs to countries that control production and technology, then China is one of the strongest candidates to become the world's leading power. But this is where the story gets darker. China's biggest enemy may not be America. It may not even be war. It may be time. China is facing a serious demographic challenge. Birth rates have fallen and the population is aging. Now ask yourself, who will run the factories? Who will pay the taxes? Who will support millions of elderly people? And who will drive economic growth in the decades ahead? This is where the contradiction appears. China became extraordinarily wealthy over the past few decades, but the same generation that powered much of that growth is now getting older. That is why some analysts make a powerful argument. China may grow old before it becomes fully rich. But China has another card to play: automation. If there are fewer workers, robots can perform part of their jobs. If artificial intelligence increases productivity, one worker may eventually accomplish what once required several people. So perhaps technology can partially compensate for China's demographic problem. But then comes another problem: geography. China is a massive land power and an industrial giant, but its modern economy is deeply connected to global trade, and much of that trade moves by sea. And this is where the United States has a major geopolitical advantage: its global network of alliances and naval power. And America's not alone. Japan, South Korea, Australia, and other partners form a much wider strategic and economic network across the Indo-Pacific. That is why some analysts describe China as being inside a kind of geographic cage. But saying that America could simply close one oil route for a week and send China back to the Stone Age would be a massive oversimplification. China has strategic reserves, overland routes, domestic energy production, and years of effort aimed at diversifying its supply chains. So the real question is not whether America can destroy China. The real question is, if a major crisis happens, which side can endure the pressure for longer? China is not simply trying to become stronger. It is trying to reduce its dependence on systems controlled by other countries. That means everything from advanced technology and semiconductors to energy, supply chains, and digital infrastructure.
It also means reducing vulnerability in energy and building alternative routes for the movement of goods and resources. And this is where the digital yuan enters the story. But replacing the dollar is not as simple as creating another digital currency. The dollar is backed by an enormous global financial, banking, and trading network. It is a system built on trust, institutions, markets, and decades of international relationships. Replacing that system would be enormously difficult. So perhaps China is not simply competing with America. China is competing with time. On one side, an aging population, fewer workers, and economic pressure. On the other side, artificial intelligence, robotics, automation, technology, and industrial scale. China has to increase productivity before demographic pressure becomes much harder to manage. That means China's biggest project may not simply be becoming a superpower. It may be building an economy that can continue growing, even with fewer young people. If China succeeds, we could witness one of the biggest shifts in global power in modern history. China could move from being known primarily as the factory of the world to becoming one of the world's most important technology and innovation centers. And if AI, robotics, and automation successfully replace much of the productivity lost through demographic decline, China could enter a completely different economic era. But if China fails to make that transition, the consequences could be very different. A major Chinese slowdown would not stay inside China. Global supply chains, commodity markets, trade, and financial systems could all feel the shock. That is why the world is watching China so closely. Its success would reshape the global balance of power. Its failure could send shockwaves through the entire world economy. And this is why the future of China may come down to two competing forces: demographic gravity and technological acceleration. So the biggest question may be this: can artificial intelligence and robotics compensate for a population that is getting older? And can technology reduce the geographic limitations that have always shaped China's strategic position? Or are we actually watching the final breaths of a great dragon? Because China is no longer simply trying to win a competition. It is trying to win that competition before time runs out. If China succeeds, a new global order could emerge. If it fails, the consequences could reach far beyond its borders. So what do you think? Will AI and technology give China enough power to overcome aging in geography? Or are we watching the last great rise of an aging dragon? Which side are you on? The power of money and technology, or the force of demographics and geography? Tell me in the comments.